entertaining, talking sports.
What is going on, Hoops fans? Back at it with another New York Knicks video. And in this video, I'm going to dive into a couple of topics with the New York Knicks. I took the day off yesterday because, quite frankly, my voice was killing me. But I should be able to do the live stream tomorrow, so hopefully I see some of you guys there for that. But the New York Knicks, of course, won their second of 3 games since Derrick Rose has joined the team. And they're starting to inch closer to that 500 mark. The Knicks now stand at 13-15 with just, I think it is, 9 games to go until we get the second half of the schedule. Of course, the way that the NBA did it this year was they split the schedule into 2 halves, and the Knicks have surprised up to this point in time, at least in my opinion. I didn't think that they'd be hovering around 500, and when you look at their upcoming schedule, they could easily be 15-15 after 30 games. When you look at some of the teams on their schedule, of course, some of the challenges that they may face are the fact that Mitch Robinson now is set to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Now, the Knicks look good in their first game without him, but of course, they were going up against an injury-riddled Washington Wizards team, one of the worst teams in the league. The good news for the Knicks over this stretch up until at least what we know, March 2nd, which at that point will be about 3 weeks into the Mitch Robinson timeline, the Knicks aren't exactly facing world beaters. They're playing the Hawks, the Magic, the Spurs, the Timberwolves, who are not very good, the Golden State Warriors, who we've already played this year, the Sacramento Kings, the Indiana Pacers, the Detroit Pistons, and then the Spurs again. I think it is very plausible that the Knicks could at least win 5 out of the next 9, maybe 6 out of the next 9, and get themselves right around that 500 mark after the first half of the season. In which case, you'd hope that you'd have Mitch back within about a week's time, and maybe you'd only miss another 2 or 3 games before he was inserted back into the lineup. And make no mistake about it, losing Mitch is a big loss for this New York Knicks team defensively. He's a rim protector. He's very good off the pick and roll. He is much better than Nerlens Noel in that aspect. I love Noel. He's definitely a guy that provides valuable minutes off the bench, but you definitely lose something with Mitch out of the starting lineup, and that is something that we'll have to try to overcome. And I think the way that the Knicks are going to do it is kind of the way that Tom Thibodeau talked about, where he's going to try to get the most out of several players on his roster to make up for the loss. You've started to see Obi Toppin get more minutes. You've started to see Noel get more minutes, and you've started to see Taj Gibson get more minutes. And that's the way they're going to have to go about doing it, a collective effort. And hopefully we could tread water until such time Mitch Robinson gets back, as the New York Knicks are trying to compete for the playoffs. Right now we're the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. And one guy that has brought us hope and I'm going to get into the rumors in a second about other players that the New York Knicks could potentially be interested in bringing in to acquire. But one guy that has brought us significant hope in the way that the Knicks have looked since he's joined the team is Derrick Rose. And Derrick Rose was a guy that I was worried about when the Knicks were rumored to be making a trade, that we'd give up way too much. The Knicks ended up giving up nothing. Another thing we worried about when we brought him in was how would it affect Quickley's minutes? How would it affect the rest of this basketball team and the development of the younger players on this squad? Well, I think what you've seen is the way that Thibodeau's mixed and matched with these minutes. He's actually done a good job in that aspect. You've started to see, even though he's still starting, Elfrid Payton's minutes gone down. Quickley still averaging 21, 22 minutes a game over this 3-game stretch. And you've seen Quickley and Rose play very well together with one another. Not just those two, but the bench in general. You've seen an incredible growth with the bench since he's been in here. And I kind of wanted to jump into the numbers of what he's done for this New York Knicks bench, which before he got here was a liability, a major liability with this basketball team. And now it's become a strength. Right now, when you see the New York Knicks bench go out there, you almost feel like they're going to do better than the first unit. And the numbers back it up. Since Derrick Rose has been here, the New York Knicks, throughout the entirety of the season, they played 25 games without Rose, 3 with him. Their 2 highest scoring games off the bench are since Rose has been here, of 52 points and 49 points. They did not eclipse those marks at all over the first 25 games of the entire year before Rose got here. In addition to that, if you do the averages, in the first 25 games before Rose's arrival, the New York Knicks bench averaged 33 points and shot 42% from the field. Since he's been here over the last 3 games, the New York Knicks bench, and of course this is a small sample size, not going up against the best of opponents, but still, it's eye-opening. They're averaging 15 more points off the bench, 48 points as a team off the bench, and they're shooting 6% higher from the field. 48% from the field off the bench. Derrick Rose has a lot to do with that. You see him come into the game, and you see them move the ball around the court, and it just looks like a good flow. Much better than before he got here, and I think we expected that as New York Knicks fans. And a major reason why I continue to say I may want Rose to stay on the bench is because of the emergence of Obi Toppin with Derrick Rose. Now, of course, you've seen R.J. Barrett fall up a little bit. And I also want to talk about the starting lineup and how I think it actually is a benefit with Rose coming here as well. You've started to see the starters' minutes decrease, which is good. That's something that we worried about going into the year when we saw the 8-man rotations. Julius Randle. Well, Randle's only played 32 and 33 minutes each of the last 2 games. You've started to see Barrett's minutes dip. You've started to see everybody's minutes dip, which is a good thing. It's only going to preserve this team down the stretch, and hopefully Tom Thibodeau doesn't run him into the ground. But as far as Toppin's growth, with Derrick Rose, Toppin, of course, was injured, at the beginning of the year. He's played 17 games this year over the 28-game schedule. In the 14 games without Derrick Rose, Obi Toppin shot a combined 27 of 62 for 43.5% from the field. In the 3 games with Derrick Rose, we've seen Obi Toppin put up the numbers that he put up at Dayton. He's 11 for 17 for 65% field goal percentage. And I know, again, it's a small sample size, but it is apparent with Rose on the floor, there is much better chemistry between him and Obi Toppin. There's no doubt about it. And it was a major reason why a lot of people thought that the New York Knicks were going to go out and acquire Rose, because they thought it would help the development of Obi Toppin. The one player that I worry about right now over the last 3 or 4 games is R.J. Barrett. He's got to get it back together. But if Barrett could get it going, this team looks like they're starting to hit on all cylinders. Of course, it's very unfortunate that we lost Mitchell Robinson, and we have to tread water over these next 9 or 10 games until such time he's ready to get close to being back. And we're going to have to wait and see how that all plays out. But that begs the question, and you're starting to hear more and more rumors about the New York Knicks potentially being interested in acquiring some players via trade to try to put this team over the top. And I'll get into whether or not I think it's a good idea, but you're starting to hear it is a possibility. And I'm going to pull up some of the quotes, and I want to make sure I get the writer's name right, so I'm going to pull that up as well. On an article from the Daily News that came out 2 days ago discussing whether or not the New York Knicks may very well be buyers at the trade deadline, and some sources that they've heard from within the organization. This was an article written by, I think it's pronounced Stephen Bondi, of the New York Daily News, talking about the possibilities of the Knicks bringing in a shooting guard, something that they desperately need. They need a number 1 scorer. There's no doubt about it. But the question is, what would the price be? And the 3 names that you hear the most are Bradley Beal. You obviously hear Zach LaVine, and you hear Victor Oladipo. Victor Oladipo carries a much smaller price tag than the other 2, but we're going to get into exactly what that price tag may potentially be for a player like Bradley Beal. They're going to be in the mix when a star becomes available. A source familiar with the Knicks told the Daily News. That's been the plan. Now, being in the mix doesn't mean anything. It means that you may just be listening to offers, and if the right deal presents itself, maybe you go out and you bring in said player. But for the price that a lot of people think that Bradley Beal may command, in my opinion, it may not be the best of ideas. Here's another quote. The new front office, led by William Wesley, never speaks publicly, but according to sources, is open to trading assets and picks for a star player. Then this was the speculation as to what it may cost to acquire a player like Bradley Beal. 3 different executives who spoke to the news defined the price as steep. One longtime GM laid it out specifically. 3 unprotected first-rounders, 2 pick swaps, a young player, and an expiring contract. That's approaching Harden territory. The Nets, as the news reported, had internal discussions acquiring Beal long before the exhausting their assets for Harden. And don't get me wrong, Bradley Beal, when you look at the numbers, has been out of this world. Actually, I didn't pull up the numbers for you guys, but he's been out of this world. He's averaging 32, almost 33 points a game this year. He leads the league in scoring. He's averaging, I think, 5 assists and 5 rebounds, and he's a very good two-way player, and he's exactly what this team would need to potentially become a legitimate threat within the Eastern Conference this year. I'm also going to go over his contract details and what he's due, but then I'm going to talk about whether or not it's worth that price tag. This is Beal's contract, so if you were to acquire him, you'd have him under contract for the next 2 years after this year, up until the age of 30. So it wouldn't just be a 1-year rental, kind of like Victor Oladipo would, but Victor Oladipo's price tag would be much lower. Now, going back to what the price tag would be, we'll start with the 3 first-round picks. Let's just say you were able to trade away the 2 picks you got from Dallas and 1 of your first-round picks. Let's just say that was the case. The Dallas picks more than likely will not be lottery picks. It looks like Dallas is starting to get it together. And if you were to acquire Beal as a Knicks GM, you would probably assume it will not be a lottery pick. So maybe it would be mid to late first-round picks, if that were to be the case. And for that, I'm okay with it. But it's where you throw in the young player and the expiring contract, where it worries me. Now, the New York Knicks expiring contracts, they don't have it. Outside of Julius Randle, who I would think if they were to acquire him, the Washington Wizards wouldn't cut him. He's only due to make $18 million on the team option next year, and he's by far the highest paid player in this team. So we don't really have an expiring contract right now on this roster. Now, the young player you're talking about, if you're getting 3 first-round picks, what does that include? Is it just Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina, the guys that we kept and maybe presumably kept for a trade like this? Or are you approaching R.J. Barrett and Immanuel Quickley status? And if you have to give up a player like R.J. Barrett and 3 first-round picks, well then, I'm not doing the deal. I still think, even though he struggled the last 3 or 4 games, R.J. Barrett is still a very young, talented player who I think will emerge into at least a borderline all-star in this league. And we've seen what Immanuel Quickley has started to do. Immanuel Quickley, now you're starting to see those percentages creep up. He's becoming a more efficient scorer, and I think that should only improve as he gets more minutes throughout the year. So those are 2 players I don't want to give up. But if I could go out and get Bradley Beal and have him under team control for 2 more years and add to what we need more than anything, a legitimate scorer on the outside for 3 first-round picks, I'd have to entertain it, for sure, if it was for the right deal. But I, in the end, think it'll be more than what I would be willing to give up. I'm not going to equate this to Carmelo Anthony because Carmelo Anthony was a pending free agent, and we gave up everything that we did. Beal, you'd still have under team control for 2 more years, but it would still be kind of taking shortcuts before the team is initially ready. Like I said, Oladipo, am I going to get excited over Victor Oladipo? He's not near the player that Bradley Beal is. He's not going to cost near as much. So if you get him on a bargain rate, maybe you bring a guy like that in. Zach LaVine would probably cost you a comparable price tag to that of a guy like Bradley Beal. Maybe a guy like Obi Toppin. But if a guy like Barrett or Quickley even comes into the discussion with all those draft picks, I'm not even entertaining the trade. For the first time in forever, the New York Knicks are building this team right, and they're making smart moves. The Derrick Rose move was a smart move. We didn't give up much, and it's helping further develop the younger players on this roster, which is what this season should be all about. And we're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out. But right now, I love the direction of this basketball team. And if they make a move like that, I just hope they don't cut into the young assets that are growing with the New York Knicks. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.